First we have Jennifer Fitzgerald, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Scope, who's one of the largest providers of disability services in Victoria. We have Elizabeth Manning, who's lecturer in the School of Accounting, Economics and Finance at Deakin University. Philippa Angley, who was in the lockup in Canberra yesterday with the budget, so we are very appreciative of her jumping on a plane and coming all the way down to us today. She's a National Policy Manager with the National Disability Services, who has lobbied very hard for the introduction of the NDIS. And we also welcome Julie Phillips, who's the Manager of the Disability Discrimination Legal Service, a statewide independent community legal centre that specialises in disability and discrimination legal matters. So a big round of applause everybody for being here on time and all connected. Yeah. So disability care commences operation on the 1st of July, with the Barwon region being the launch site for Victoria. Agreement has been reached with the Victorian State Government that will then roll out to the other regions by mid-2019. According to the NDIS website, Disability Care Australia will help improve access to disability support by giving people with disability, including people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, more choice and control over their care and support. So let's explore that a little first. I'm going to ask a few questions and then we will start working around the regions. But Philippa, I know you've had a tough 24 hours, but if I can start with you. Your organisation's been the one really pushing for this. The Everybody Counts campaign has been a major thing. Broadly speaking, why is it a good thing?
I think most people will have some awareness of the Productivity Commission's inquiry into disability care and support. And the overwhelming, conclusion from that inquiry was that disability support right across Australia was grossly underfunded, was fragmented, was inequitable and was very unfair, and that it did not provide the resources to many people to live the lives that most of us think that they should have the opportunity to live. So I think that was the basis for, our increased energy to try and get that resolved. And NDIS is a partner with Carers Australia and the Australian Federation of Disability Organisations, and through that alliance they have driven the Every Australian Counts campaign, which really picked up momentum once the Productivity Commission's report was handed down. Before I go on, I'd just like to say thank you to disability service providers right across Australia who largely funded that campaign to make it happen. And I think that disability service providers have seen how difficult it is for people with disability and their carers for many, many years, and have embraced the opportunity to do something much better.
So Liz, if I can come to you next. In recent weeks the Prime Minister has announced, and this was confirmed last night in the budget, that it will be part funded through a levy similar to Medicare. From an economic perspective, is the NDIS or disability care good government policy, and why?
Yes,
That's right.
yes, it's absolutely good government policy. I think one of the overwhelming things that came out of the Productivity Commission report and some of the other work that's been done is that it makes economic sense to invest in people with disabilities. It also makes social sense. It comes down also to choices about how we want our society to look. But from a pure money perspective, we're stuck in a system at the moment which is completely crisis-driven. That has, and the problem with that is that when someone is in crisis, there tends to be demand for crisis intervention, and without any extra funding, that takes demand away from early intervention and from respite and so on. So it's kind of setting up the next crisis. And we're in a situation where the number of people accessing disability services has been increasing by about 8% over 5 years to 2010. And basically we're getting to a position where it's unsustainable. But more than that, there have been reports done on the cost of disability. So there was an Access Economics report done in 2007. It was commissioned by Cerebral Palsy Australia, and they were looking specifically at the cost of cerebral palsy, and they were finding that if you include if you estimate the cost of cerebral palsy in 2007, including the value of lost well-being, the cost for an individual was $115,000 per person per annum, and that 76% of those costs were borne by individuals. So we have a system where huge costs are borne by individuals, and an insurance system would allow those costs to be spread thinly around all people in the country. But more than that, an insurance system will then allow investment in best practice, in early intervention, in stopping, preventing things getting into crisis. So in fact, the system becomes more efficient and less costly overall. So Access Economics actually concluded that an NDIS would be the most cost-effective way of addressing the crisis in disability care. And there are lots of, I can give lots of examples of both personal and also systemic and economic inefficiencies associated with the current system.
We might come to some more of those as time permits. But Julie, if I can come to you now, you're looking at discrimination on a day-to-day basis with the clients you serve. What is your view of the legislation? Will it actually help overcome any discrimination barriers?
Well, that's a broad question. Well, look, it will have to overcome many, I hope, because there's such a large amount of money being injected into the system, and that's hopefully got to advantage people with disabilities. However, and look, I think it's fantastic, and I should say that because I don't want to sound cynical about the whole thing, because I think it's great. But there are other systems in place that make money available for people with disabilities at different times in their life, and people with disabilities still have great difficulty accessing things like quality services. I'm thinking, for example, of attending care and some of the reports that have been done on the quality of that, and the abuse of people with disabilities in systems which are already funded. So obviously it's going to be, it's going to have many advantages, but I think there's just going to be the need for policing and advocacy to make sure that the perhaps organisations that might spring up to assist in this endeavour, and I'm thinking of, I don't know if you remember when all the autism early intervention funding was provided by the government a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden all these early intervention autism expert organisations were coming up out of the woodwork, and it was hard to know who was an expert and who wasn't, but there were many. So it's just an example of when funding was made available, service providers popped in to provide services with that funding, and there was not really any control over the quality of those services. And so I think that's another issue. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to be alert about, and I think we also need to look at some of the information from where similar systems has come and what has been learned. So I guess my short answer is, look, it'll be terrific, but there's going to have to be a lot of monitoring and advocacy to make sure that quality is provided to people with disabilities in all of these areas.
There were a number of questions in advance about the question of advocacy, so we will revisit that. But Jennifer, from a service provider point of view, you're the largest provider, a lot in regional Victoria. What changes for you on 1st of July? What actually happens? What do you need to do?
It's interesting, Maureen, I was thinking about this over the last few days, and if I think about Scope as an organisation, and hence invite people listening to think of their organisation, almost every aspect of our organisation will change. The relationship with the people we support and their families, so changing to a customer-focused engagement, where the person that we support has choice, and they will shape our services going forward. Thinking about our workforce, where the market will determine some of the services that will be sought going forward. Do we have the workforce skill set and capability to address that demand? How will we change that over time? Looking at the impact, financial impact on cash flow for organisations. We've traditionally been paid ahead of service delivery. We'll now be paid in arrears. So organisations that don't have a substantial cash reserve and the ability to manage their accounts in a timely and effective manner will be impacted upon. If I look at our brand and marketing, a lot of us work in the not-for-profit sector. This isn't an area where we've had perhaps as much focus as we will need to going forward. What will differentiate us as a quality provider when we know that perhaps for-profit organisations will come into this sector? And that's fine, I have no problem with that. We are creating a commercial market. But I do believe that the not-for-profit and public sector historically has an important value proposition that I would like to see survive in a competitive marketplace. So how will we differentiate ourselves? I think that it will become a crowded marketplace. How will people with a disability and their family discriminate? We've already talked about quality, Julie's mentioned quality, and the arrival of experts on the field who may not be tried and tested. We've also got, I guess, the tension for organisations like Scope. We're mission driven. We're here to enable people to live as empowered and equal citizens. How will we manage that and deliver on that mission when there will be a tension in terms of quality and quantity? And how will people with a disability and their families discriminate over time what it is that is the priority to them? And how will we as providers be able to ensure that we do continue to deliver on that quality? And finally, probably, because there are lots, but I'll finish on governance and risk management. From the perspective of a board, this is a very different environment that organisations like ours will be moving into. We need robust governance frameworks. We need people who have the right mixture of head and heart, who understand that we're moving into a commercial and competitive environment, but who also understand the values and history and quality of the services that have been provided by organisations like ours. And also risk management. We need sophisticated risk management frameworks and processes so that we can ensure that organisations are sustainable, that we're not going to have people with a disability and their families left unexpectedly without support and services. And I see that particularly as being a key risk that we need to identify.
The question you raised about choice, I think, has been raised by a number of people as well. And just thinking about many of the regional communities we're connecting to today and the areas they represent, how real is that choice likely to be, do you think? And you might want to comment, and others as well. In very small communities where there might only be one provider at the moment, is it really going to become competitive? A lot of, for a cost-benefit side of things, some agencies or profit organisations wouldn't even bother. So have you thought through those things?
Look, we've certainly looked at every service we currently provide. We know we will have to reorient those services. We know we will have to develop new services, and we will need to develop new ways of service delivery. So from the scope perspective, and I know Philip will speak to it in terms of the impact of thin markets and the consideration that was given to thin markets in the Productivity Commission report. But we need to look at bundling of services. We need to look at partnership with other providers. We need to use technology in a cleverer way so that we can provide service at a distance, or that we can be the expert support to a local provider. So I think that people have to be very open-minded. We have a lot of good systems and processes in the way we deliver services now. But in scope, for example, we're completely restructuring the organisation to respond to this change. And one of the positions that I have put in is a General Manager of Innovation and Service Enhancement for exactly that reason. We need to try, test and embed new ways of delivering services and support. And we need to be flexible and resilient in the way that we do that. Because I think what we need to recognise is The launch is a 3-year learning period. We will reach a more stable state over time, but in that intervening period, we have to be incredibly flexible and responsive to enable us to respond to the service choices of the people that we support. So we're wanting to put ourselves at the cutting edge. Our research plan is highly focused on the use of technology. We will be going into that space in a very determined manner in terms of the built environment. How can we use technology to enhance independence and cost contain in the built environment? But also, how can we use technology in a smart way to enhance personal independence? So I think we need to broaden our horizons. We need to have some greenfields thinking in this area.
Thanks. Just before we go to Philippa, could I just remind everyone to make sure your microphones are off or on mute in the locations until we do call on you, because we are picking up a bit of extraneous noise. Thank you very much, and welcome, Warrnambool. I see that you've joined us as well. Thanks very much for coming along. So Philippa, to you, from your perspective, the question of how real will choice be for people in particularly small communities? Do you see that as a realistic achievement that NDIS can get to?
I agree with everything Jenny has said. I think we need to just be mindful that things aren't going to change quickly from day one for many people, and that as the NDIS rolls out into areas that with smaller populations, that it'll take some time for the market to change. And even given that, there will be some areas where we never see a whole range of service providers to choose from. And I think that's one thing that the Disability Care Australia is going to have to give thought to, of how they are going to respond to that. But already across the country, we're hearing of different service responses that organisations are making. I was speaking with one of our members from Queensland just a couple of weeks ago, and they have started providing respite services to people living on remote stations, and a worker is flying in every 4 to 8 weeks and living in the homestead for a week at a time to provide respite for that family, so that the family members can do other things, including work on the property. So I think that we will see different service responses, but it will take time to develop, and undoubtedly will be probably slower in some of the rural and remote areas, just because we know that we don't have service providers there ready to go who have given necessarily the thought to new ways of providing those services. But as Jenny said, I think we'll see some real developments in the technology space that I think we haven't even thought of what they might be, but I think they are quite exciting.